We are live, coming back at you from the studio of 2W. It is an incredible time to be in our industry. We have a lot of things happening. Front, center, up, down. We are seeing so many different movements in our industry, and I think it's important that we talk about them. Automakers are starting to cut back. We're seeing the parts industry. I think it's going to continue to hold all else equal. And actually, I think we're going to start to see some growth. We're seeing a lot of organizations make strategic moves. A lot of interesting things happening in the industry right now. And it is very exciting to be with you. But more importantly, Lucas Welk, back in black, baby. How are you, man?
Back in action, man. Great to be back. Happy to be here. And another exciting episode. We've got a whack of these episodes under our belt now coming into the end of 2024. A lot of exciting things happening with 2W. A lot of sponsorships, a lot of stuff going on. So it's been busy, and that's why we've been out of action. But here we are again to end the year strong.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I think when we first started the 2W podcast and everything that we bring to the automotive, the parts industry, the automakers, performance, to think that we are at episode 64. Wow. Who would have ever thought?
Exactly. I think we're pretty much industry professionals at this point. It's funny. We were talking earlier. You kind of evolve with this sort of thing, right? I remember the first few episodes. We really didn't know what we were doing, and we were really planning it out. We've got an outline. Okay, Gideon, you're going to say this, and I'm going to say this, and we're going to talk about these topics. And I mean, now basically we hop on and we say, look, let's ad hoc this. This is what we think the audience wants to hear. We're not scripting any of this stuff. We've got a list of topics we want to run through, and now we just kind of hit it. And I think it's great. It's what makes the podcast.
Yeah, well, I think when you take two dumb guys and you put them in the same box, you're bound to get out of it somehow.
Right, exactly. And somehow this worked. I have no idea how it ever became as large as it possibly is at the moment, because it's huge. But I mean, just by mere fluke, every day. I mean, we were just in a meeting, yesterday and today, where people were like, "Oh, we love your podcast. We listen to you every week, and love when you said this and interviewed this guy." And it's still kind of unbelievable that people would take time out of their day to listen to this nonsense, but they absolutely do.
Well, I'm every single day surprised at the feedback, and coming off of Vegas, which is, I guess, gosh, almost 4 months ago. I'm sorry, 4 weeks ago, 3.5, 4 weeks ago. The outpouring of support on what we're doing from the data people in our industry, from the automakers and people who are in the OE side down to the aftermarket side, the outpouring of support, and running the podcast live from Vegas, giving so many great companies legacy, right? Tier 1 manufacturers down to that small shop that just started and they're building products. But just to get the outpouring of love and support and be like, guys, keep doing it, right? Keep on talking about the things that are important to the industry. It's important to us. That to me is so motivating, because I just have such a genuine love for the industry, and I truly want it to move forward during my tenure in this industry over the course of potentially 40 or 50 years to be the best possible outcome, that the guys behind us, hey man, they've got a better industry. They've got a better industry to work with. They've got better technology. They've got a better streamlined system. They've got better ideas. They've got, kind of a pathway to leadership. I mean, that's important. And I think it's awesome what we're doing, and we're not going to stop.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's correct. And it's, people are kind of recognizing our strengths. I mean, your strengths are much more on the automotive, sort of end, that, we're taking multiple calls per day, per week, and doing speaking, engagement things and stuff online with corporate meetings. And Your depth in terms of the auto industry knowledge is amazing. I mean, I'm much more on the operations strategy sort of side with my sort of mindset, but it just works so well. And I think people are able to kind of recognize, and they're going to get more of that, in the new year, and we talked about that, where we'll kind of niche down and really, this podcast is for this certain people, and it's not for 99.9% of the population. It's for the 0.01% of the population. And we're so thankful that they're tuning in and reaching out to us and connecting with us on LinkedIn. And it's a great little community that we've put together. And even, a call that we just got off of a few hours ago, we met with a great individual who I'm sure is going to be listening to this podcast. He owns, a little racing organization, does motor car racing, that we're going to support through our magazine, through our podcast. And again, we're doing this for this guy completely free. And that's what we're here for, is to support the industry. That's what we want to do. Obviously we want to work with organizations in some sort of profitable method, but at the same time, look, if you're out there and you're starting out small and there's some way that we can help you or connect you with the right people, reach out to us, please. We're happy. We're here to help. And that's our goal, our mission in 2025, since this has been such a big success so far.
Yeah, it was Douglas Motorsports up in New Hampshire. That was a really awesome
Absolutely.
call, and he loved everything about it. And yeah, we look forward to really having him on and showcasing his racing team. He's a manufacturer of his own products. And I think what I've always found interesting is whenever, you deal with the big global legacy type companies, you deal with the very small guy. There's one thing that makes this industry tick. And if you don't recognize it out of the gate, you probably are not in the industry for very long. People really love the industry. There's a lot of 40 and 50-year-old guys. I work with them on the daily, you as well, that you're like, well, how did you get in? Well, I was, 23 years old and I got into this and I started with, Denso, or I started with my own shop, or my dad owned a shop. And I love it so much. And you find that the passion connects this industry like no other industry in my perspective. And that's an encouraging place to be. That's where I want to be. I love that. I love it. And it's a lot of fun to watch it. It's very much a white collar, blue collar. We say it a lot, but if you're a young industry talent and you're looking for an opportunity of where do I take my career, I'm maybe coming out of high school, I'm maybe coming out of college, the automotive is a great place. It's a very engaging community. It's a very thriving community. We love having young talent come in. And again, reach out to myself, Lucas, and we'll connect you with a lot of the right people in the industry. But that's what's so much fun about being in the parts. And it's a really exciting place. And we look forward to watching it develop and grow over the years.
No, correct. Yeah, I mean, the dynamic is really shifting, and we're seeing it, I think, somewhat slowly. And like our interviews, let's say with people like Ariel, for example, a few weeks ago, you're seeing younger professionals join, the ranks of these, CEOs and executives in these positions, which is great. Rather than us typically, like you say, dealing with the older executives on a daily basis. If they're in their 40s, that's extremely young. Usually they're 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s. CEOs, VPs, and stuff like that we're dealing with. So we're kind of seeing that shift, which I think is interesting. And the whole industry, we're seeing, shift from, in my opinion, auto dealerships. I don't see a lot of people going out saying, I'm going to build a brick and mortar dealership anymore. They're more shifting towards the Tesla e-commerce, sort of guideline, and saying we're going to do everything online, or we're going to have a showroom inside a shopping center, inside of a mall. So that whole shift is now taking place, which I think is great and interesting. And it's just a matter of being prepared for it. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, well, I think speaking of, which is kind of a good topic, and if you don't watch the news or you don't stay kind of in tune, to your point, we're seeing a major shift across all automakers, right? They're slashing jobs, they're slashing budgets, they're slashing their P&L on what their expenditures are. They're looking at CapEx a little bit differently. And I think, when you look at General Motors, right? They just released 2,000 layoffs, right? Half of those being white collar. So from production to white collar, we're seeing a lot of white collar jobs dry up. And, I think we know why. You look at Ford. Ford had 4K in cuts, right? Significant due to why? Well, they run down significant losses. Okay, well, why? Well, we heavily invested in our capex and EV, and we're now seeing that the demand wasn't there because largely it was driven by, I would arguably say political kind of demand and tax rebates and basically free money, or free tax cuts where, oh gosh, we're not seeing that the demand is there. Volkswagen, right? They're laying off 10%.
Mhm.
Jeep Stellantis 4K, some half factory, half white collar, right? So we're seeing across the board a slash. And I've said it, even if you go back to earlier in the year when we talk about EV, I've said it there, not everybody can win. You have pressures from China, right? BYD, they're trying to work that market into the North America through Mexico, through Canada. So if you look at a lot of the political kind of movements or even the business movements, we're seeing a hotbed investment in going into Mexico, right? Because they see that as a gateway in. Okay, if people are moving in and we can undercut the price. So when you look at like your legacy automakers, GM, Ford, Volkswagen, Jeep globally, when you look at the North American market share, they're at risk. I mean, they really are at risk. And I think more importantly, and I know, Lucas, you run a daily blog, and man, thank you so much for that, because there's a lot of great insights there. But when you look at that kind of shift, it's a lot about, are we doing just what everybody else is doing, or are we kind of getting creative? Are we creating the strategy? Are we creating the future? And I think that's a big question. If you're in the C-suite across your automakers, are you just following the next guy? Because that is where you're going to find yourself upside down. And that's what we're seeing across the board. It was like a bunch of dodo ducks that they just kept like, and you know who's not in this list? You know who is not reporting a ton of layoffs is Toyota, Lexus. They're investing more in hydrogen. They're investing more in hybrid. That's been very well known. And I think you're starting to see that. You're going to see Toyota over the next 5 to 10 years, these decisions, right? And I think Japanese thinkers are very, very smart thinkers. I really love,
Mhm.
I've been to Japan a few times. I love the country. I'm just fascinated by the country and their leadership and how they operate. It's very controlled. And so I think we're starting to see that as an indicator as we kind of look at the aftermarket, as we look at different sub industries and performance. I think we're starting to see those trends happen right now.
No, absolutely. And we talk about it all the time now, organizations and people. I think, with AI, as we were talking about with Ariel as well, is that, you really have to be the best of the best. Understand, what product you're making, understanding who you're making it for, why you're making it, the passion behind it. And as far as jobs go, you see, like you say, all these manufacturers laying off hundreds of thousands, and hundreds and thousands of people. And if you're not the best right now in your industry, or you're not the best in your particular role, you're going to be cut. I mean, with AI coming on board, it's absolutely wild integrating AI into these organizations, because let's say you're in marketing, for example, or you're a copywriter or a writer. If you're not the best of the best in that particular field, you're going to be cut, because AI can write a more than half ideal article. So if you're an average director of marketing, a VP of marketing, an account executive that is just writing generic little emails, doing a generic little job, well, there's stuff for $19.99 per month that can easily replace you. And that's what these organizations are looking
Yep.
at. So are AI going to take jobs? Absolutely. But where you have this chance to shine is really push the boundary, push the limits, and learn your field, extremely well. Go above and beyond. Be better than AI, because there's lots of opportunity. AI isn't the best at
Mm-mm.
everything. So you have the ability to jump ahead of it. But if you think you're just going to sit there cozy at this point in time, it's not going to happen. And the organizations are seeing that for sure. And you see what's even politically, I don't want to get into politics, but you're going to see that with Elon Musk, obviously, in the new Trump administration. He's taking that, sort of opinion to it and saying, well, what do we need these jobs for? These people are just cogs in the wheel doing average things on an average day and adding no value. We don't need these type of people. We need real thinkers and doers, I think at this point in time.
I think we're going to see, not to go into politics, but I think we're going to see a really changing of the guard. I think we're going to see a lot of mix up. I think we're going to see, I mean, because you got to think about it. So, okay, obviously Elon Musk has taken a a position in the cabinet, right? He has taken a position with the, what is it, the Doge or whatever,
Yep.
the Department of whatever efficiency, of government efficiency. Well, if you look what he did to Twitter, right? So let's just take Twitter. I think that's a really great case study, and I think you're going to find that in many great business schools across the country, around the world, I think there's going to be a very large case study on Twitter. Because if you think about that just fundamentally and how they went about their business, and then the purchase from Elon Musk, right? The negative PR, then they didn't want to sell it, and they were going to sell it because he was going to back up. It was back out of it. It was almost like he was toying with them. It was almost like one of those when they just toy with their food until they're dead. And but what happens if you study it and you look at the fundamentals that he applied, right? He cut, I think I read 1 in 4, and no, 3 of 4,
Oh,
3 out of 4
3 or 4,
employees.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
3.
80% or something,
Yeah, like an
looking wild,
80%,
70-80%.
yeah, reduction in human capital. And when you think about of an organization, your highest expense is human capital.
Right.
Most of the time, human capital is a very expensive thing, but we have to have it, and that's how businesses grow, right? And so, if you think about it fundamentally, he went in and slashed 80% of the human capital in the organization. And then what you found over the course of a few months, he deployed certain things to really generate, whenever content is created, he wants it to be accurate, right? He doesn't want this to be a pedal of, hey, I'm pushing one way or the other. It is accurate. Here's what it is. You judge for yourself. And we've seen Twitter go from where it was more getting into the political climate, and now moving more into a global source of information, which that transformation over a period of, I mean, months is incredible. That's
Yes.
very difficult.
That's right. That's
And
right.
and and,
And
and to see it is amazing.
and he's just not getting, and the problem with Elon Musk again, I don't think he's getting the credit for it. I mean, you look at what he's doing with SpaceX and, like you say, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Tesla. And I mean, the mainstream media, and again, not to politicize this, but the mainstream media isn't really crediting him with, the accomplishment that he's done. I mean,
No.
from starting most of these organizations, even if you're just talking, SpaceX, Twitter, the Boring Company, I mean, all these companies that he's essentially created and is running are, some of the top companies in the world. And if you only did one of those companies, forget multiple of these companies, you're considered an absolute genius, one of the best of our time. And he's got multiple, the richest man in the world, and all these things. So, I mean, whether you like Elon Musk or not, or agree with him or not, I think you really have to admire, what he's accomplished, and certainly what he gets behind, he does follow through. And I think we're going to see that in the near future.
Well, and that's fascinating that you bring that up, because I think it's relevant. But I think when we apply it to our industry, I really think the automotive, we really need to get with that same type of philosophy and model. I think you're going to see a lot of, organizations falter because they fail to adopt. I think when you look at, say, Pep Boys, right, in the 90s, that was like the parts store across North America, right? They've obviously faltered and they didn't really evolve. You look at the legacy stories like the Blockbuster, right, against Netflix, and you look at, what was it, Kodak and the digital camera, and you look at all of these pieces of the puzzle, and I think it just from our industry perspective, we look at the transformation of the digital asset and how we're thinking about it of an organization. If you don't apply these forward thinking models, I've always said the bigger you grow, the more a percentage of your P&L needs to be focused on R&D, to where you have a small nimble team, and they're just moving at light speed, to where you can find and be nimble and quick. Big organization, small R&D department, and you're out there exploring, because we all know, and I think this goes back to kind of just a fundamental principle of living, is a free mind is an incredible creative mind.
Mhm.
And I think when you look at even professionally, there's a lot of people that I've worked with in the past and over the course of my career, that they get bogged down by the busyness, right? By the fear. I've always applied two principles in my professional journey, and I always apply that to people that I work with, or at least I try to let them know this is, I think, important. Is one, you eliminate fear from your arsenal, right? Just completely eliminate it, like mentally. eliminate it. And two, believe in yourself like you've never believed in yourself before. And what that does is it creates a free mind, it creates a creative thinker, and it creates a great teammate, more importantly, right? To where you can lead when you need to, but you can also be a teammate at the same time. And I think when we look at it, we're seeing a lot of shifts in the automakers with the layoffs, right? And we see a lot of shifts in the aftermarket from a parts perspective and how we're rethinking it. Everyone's trying, but I think we really need to get back to creative principles, because if we don't, we're going to see our industry continue to just kind of lock up, and that's not a very healthy place to be, personally, professionally, and as an organization. You want it to be a living, breathing, kind of alive type of personality, I guess you could say. And that's what creates, the next level growth.
No, exactly. And understanding, where your customers are. If we're talking about e-commerce, your customers are online, and organizations are slowly starting to adopt that. But just understanding that that's really where your customers are now. They're online, and when they buy, they expect the Amazon experience now. They're expecting, right, I need this part, I need this accessory for my car. And they're all jived up about it, and they want it, and it's a spur of the moment purchase. They just want to be able to go on a website, click order, 2 3 4 clicks maximum, and boom, that order is on the way to them. It's a last minute sort of purchase, but that's where your consumers are. And understanding, they want to understand who they're buying from, like, depending who you like to purchase from. Like, I like to purchase from Patagonia, let's say, for example. It's all fair trade, it's all equal pay stuff, it's reusable stuff that they believe in. I know what they believe in the short term and in the long term, so that's why I support them. They don't want to be bogged down anymore. If you think you're going online and just spreading your message everywhere and interrupting everybody on a daily basis with pop-ups and spam and emails, buy my shit, putting stuff on social media, buy me, buy me, buy me. People don't want that. They don't want to be interrupted day to day. They certainly don't want a phone call or a text message interrupting them with their own family time, with their wife, their kids, at their work, thinking that they're getting an important call or an important email. And meanwhile, it's you spamming them about your product. You want to kind of craft your message and your branding towards your top of mind. If I want a coffee and I'm sitting here at home and I'm doing a podcast or a long interview, and I think to myself, geez, I really would love a white latte at the moment, I'll think of Starbucks. And I know I can go on my phone within 2 clicks. I can order from Starbucks, and a Starbucks shows up to me within 45 minutes. So that's absolutely fantastic, and that's adding value to me. And that's what these organizations, these dealerships, whoever you are, parts manufacturers, need to understand. Who's your target customer? How are you reaching them? And what value at the end of the day are you adding? And that's going to build your brand for sure.
Well, it's outcome based.
Yeah.
And I think, when we look at, a lot of automakers are looking at their parts distribution, their parts digital transformation, right? I think like Mopar does a fantastic job on their parts model. If you haven't looked at it, store.mopar.com. If you want to, potentially buy a Mopar part, they tie in the whole distribution network. It's a really cool program. And we're seeing a lot of that shift in the aftermarket as well. Manufacturers tying in their distribution network, right? Collectively working together. But I think to your point, is when we look at these things and we look at buying behaviors, the buying behaviors are not the 60-year-old parts manager or the parts buyer. They're there, and don't get me wrong, and we're not going to overlook them. But if you want to continue to look at the success over the 3, 5, 10, 20-year term, you cannot look backwards and do the same things you did the last 10, 20, or 30 years in the rear view mirror. It's not going to work looking at the 30 years ahead of us. We know that, the folks coming into the marketplace, right? Like, think of it. I mean, kids that are 20 years old, if they go into a company that's 20 or 30 years behind, they are going to think this is archaic, and it's an archaic way of thinking. And so we have to think about that. So when we look at the model of technology, and we're seeing a rise in e-commerce, I think you had noted that, is how you're meeting your end consumer, right? So how are you helping enable your distribution partners to sell more parts? How are you thinking about meeting that customer quicker, right? Where they're buying, where they're looking, that repair shop, the DIYer, the enthusiast, those guys all are looking for an outlet to ultimately fuel their passion, right? Whether they're
That's
in the
right.
repair business or they're in the performance business, and I think those are pieces that if we don't if we take our eye off of that, you're going to find yourself behind the eight ball. Are you making your partners better? Are you making your customers, are you delighting them? Are you making them feel like they are really a part of your ecosystem? And I think it goes back to a very simple saying in life, right? I think we can apply this to business, but also the automotive for sure. Is if you want more friends, be a better friend,
Yeah.
right? If you want more friends, make somebody close to you feel important, special,
Right.
loved.
Yep.
Listen to them, maybe give them honest advice, not just bullshit advice. But I think
Right.
it's the same model when you start to look at, like, say, manufacturers and distribution, automakers and their dealer network. Are you bringing them closer? Are you making them better? Because the second you start to make their organization better, that relationship is going to absolutely grow organically. And we all know
Right.
that that is the best type of relationship to work and ultimately grow sales and grow parts sales, and meet your customers where they're at. But we're seeing
Yeah.
a major focus on online, and if you do not look at it as a top three priority in the organization, you'll find yourself further behind every single year in the world of the evolution that is digital transformation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's all how you're making these people feel, or the value that you're adding to the organization, or the money that you're bringing into the organization. And I mean, I think that's the one nice thing, Gideon. We go into these meetings every day, and let's say, on the 2W side, we can be ourselves. We're in
Oh,
there really for their benefit, and we can sit in those meetings, and they might disagree with every damn thing we say, which is fine. Go ahead and disagree with it. That's your opinion. That's fair. But we can kind of speak our mind because we know we're trying to help them. And it makes that meeting, that conference call, whatever it is, much, much easier because we're standing behind what we're saying. We're not just sitting there trying to sell you something and trying to make a commission and trying to make a few bucks per hour and charging you 1 hour's worth of time just so that we can put it in our pockets and run away. I mean, that is not our business model, and never has been, and it never will be. I mean, on countless occasions, we'll sit with this board, we'll sit with this particular person, we'll kind of handhold you through this particular process, and we think it's going to take about 2 hours. But meanwhile, it takes 6 hours. We don't care about the other 4 hours. We want to make sure that works. Same thing with this sponsorship. We're going to have Doug on from his racing company,
mhm.
in a couple of weeks. I want to see that work. We offered that to Doug, complimentary, free of charge, because we want to give back. And we do that every so often. But I mean, my goal with that at the end of the day isn't to, pocket anything for Gideon, isn't to pocket anything for Lucas and to any of our staff members. This is because we want Doug to be highly successful. And when Doug is wildly successful in 6 months, 1 year, whatever the case may be, he, hopefully will remember, hey, there's Gideon, there's Lucas, fucking really great guys. They wanted to help us out. And here's what we did. And I think that gets lost. We see that so many times, Gideon, now within organizations that, that kind of personality and person to person gets lost. And I mean, that breaks my heart literally to see that, because I think when I join any organization or we do consulting for any organization, the purpose is to benefit that organization. And we genuinely care. I mean, I don't want to go to work somewhere every day that I don't care about, that I don't want to see successful. I don't want my workmate, to be successful or to get fired or to be, let go or transferred to a different department. I want everybody's success. I want to see everybody compensated well, treated extremely well. As my partner, they've got their own family to look after at home. They've got their own obligations. So I think we got to get out of the mentality of it's all about me, rather than, it's all about the organization. They're the one who compensates me, but get it out of your head. It's all about me, both personally wise and work wise.
Yeah, we've kind of come into a me culture,
Yeah.
and that's detrimental to personal, professional health and how you interact. But it's funny, I was having a conversation with a prominent business leader here, kind of local in my area, And we were talking about artificial intelligence, right? Automation. He had recently, deployed a very large investment in an AI company, in generative AI and what they were doing. And we were talking about a lot of these things. And I think it's important that organizations, obviously we focus in on automotive, but you have to think of AI because a lot of questions is, well, how do I apply it, right? How do I think about AI? And I think the most important piece about AI is to think of it in two buckets. Is you draw a line down the road, and one side is AI and automation and things that are improving the process, right? Improving the piping of the company, improving the things that are static, right? The things that we work to have a better, maybe, organization from a process perspective, or maybe there's AI that we can deploy that becomes like a smart machine that provides feedback to maybe a purchase. Okay, I'm buying this particular part. What else should go with it? This is what maybe an automation type of AI output, right? So that first is, how can I apply it in my business to purely make it a better operational component, right? That's step one. Then step two, I think where a lot of people are missing and they're probably not even thinking about is the personal connection. In my opinion, the automation will drive efficiency and performance, and it highly impacts your top line revenue and obviously down to your net EBITDA, right, or your net operating income. But when you look at the personal piece, I think the companies that are going to be like the unicorns, the outliers, the folks who are really, really good, is they really develop hard with AI and how we can tool our company to be a powerhouse and a machine. But the secondary piece is, how do we go out and find that personal connection and compound it 10x, right? From a relationship perspective, a friendliness perspective, a joy of doing business. When you combine those two pieces, it becomes a magnificent unicorn, right? If you're really bad on the operational end and you don't know how, but you're good on the relationship side, well, then you'll be relatively successful. If you're good on the operational side, but you're really bad on the personal perspective, you'll be relatively successful, right? It'll teeter up and down. But when you find those two components and you find that happy medium where they are just really firing on all cylinders, it really becomes a unicorn. And so I think when you start to look at your parts business, you start to look at your distribution, you start to look at your partners, how can we make it easier and better and improve their experience professionally, right? Business to business. And then how do we 10x or compound the relationship with those people? In many cases, I'm sure you've been involved in signing up for something and you use a technology, but you never talk to anybody, right? But the tech's very good, but you never talk to anybody.
That's
Well,
right.
that's an imbalance of unicorn success, right? And vice versa. It's a great technology. I love it. We'll use it. And I think, we always have had experiences with that. But I think when we start to look at it, you've really got to look at it and how can I power my business through a layer of AI, but also not forget about, we really want that friendly nature and that known capacity, because that's going to unicorn the organization and ultimately take you to the next heights. It breeds employee retention. It breeds employee fulfillment, right? It breeds people really want to go and move, like go the next mile and just really work harder for you to improve both of those components. But I feel like a lot of organizations, and I've seen it, have gotten lost in this mix of confusion. And instead, they've bogged the organization down because they've lost sight of their objectives and goals. And that is a bad place to be.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's exactly right. And that's the human aspect of it where you need somebody driving that within the organization. That's not something AI can replace. You really need, and we always tell organizations, like whether it's a chief innovation officer or chief strategy officer or somebody like that, but somebody really needs to take the bull by the horns of that particular segment and run with it. And you say, if you're the CEO or the COO, you say, right, this person, I'm giving full authority to this person to drive this innovation side of things or this strategy side of things. And they're going to go in there and knock heads together and work with departments and make sure this is moving forward, because sometimes we become paralyzed, or departments become siloed and become paralyzed and don't move in any sort of direction and are just stuck. They implement things that never work because nobody knows really how they work. Even the person implementing it doesn't understand how they work or how they should be used. But that's where it's so important that you get the right person in the driver's seat in that particular role and give them the authority. And again, that's something not related to AI. That's something that'll never be replaced. If in your organization, at whatever level you're at, if you are at the very bottom to the very top, I think the number one piece of advice, Gideon, that we often, tell people is learn how to communicate. And that's where the younger generation really lacks. I mean, we
Big
see it
time.
within our own organization. I mean, everything is an email with a million CCs, and everything is a report, and everything is a follow up, and everything is a text message. Very rarely does my telephone actually ring. Or a person to person, this is how I really feel, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. You're not going to hurt my feelings, and vice versa. If I go to talk to one of my staff members, or you do, Gideon, and we have to come down hard on them, or we have a little argument on a project, we're not attacking you personally. You have nothing to worry about with your job. You're not going to be let go because we disagree. It's nothing on a personal level that that we're saying anything bad. It's merely on a professional level. We argue on a regular basis, Gideon, and 5 minutes later we can go out and have a beer and have a whiskey and say, geez, man, fucking great idea on that. I rethought about that. My big error. That's a really, really good idea. I was completely mistaken. But that just helps everybody grow. Everybody feels stronger. They feel like they can speak up. But these organizations that are kind of shoving down from the top, these other people that are lower on the totem pole, is a huge mistake. I think, as the saying goes, the smartest person who knows the most about your organization, maybe your secretary. She's on the front line. She's seeing the customers come in. She's answering the phone. She's talking to everybody from the CEO to the parts guys to the salespeople to, she's the one that literally is talking to all these different departments. So if you want to talk about efficiency or problems, she may be the first one you go to. Forget about talking to these people at the top.
Well,
They're
it's like
missing out on that.
it's like the old story of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
So,
Who knew it
right.
all? The White House
Right.
secretary.
Right. Exactly. That's very true. That's very true.
She knew
Exactly.
it all. And boy, I'm going to tell you, good secretaries are very tight-lipped.
Right.
Very
Exactly.
tight-lipped.
Exactly. That's very true. That is very, very true. Exactly.
That is and that is very true. And I think, I think we're losing a bit about that side. I mean, I think when we look at kind of what all of the cutbacks, right, and
Yep.
the automakers, we're not seeing that same trend in the aftermarket, which I think is very interesting because, to your point, as we look at how the future will roll, is the aftermarket's about 5 or 6 years behind the automakers, right? Relatively speaking, their sweet spot's about year 5 to probably year 13. And then they have some long tail inventory. But when you start to see the differences, it just shows a lot of the poor decision making, right? Whenever, and by the way, I also want to preface this with this. I'm a big believer in 10% cut every year. Or a 10% cut every, maybe even, once every other year. But I think a policy, and I think that a lot of companies we see is they don't adopt a job loss or job cut policy. Everything's very kind of under the table and under the rug, and everyone's very scared to do this or do that. But I think when you're more vocal about, hey, every single year we look at the org, and in every team we cut by 10%, because what it does is it creates a very competitive environment in a friendly way, right? Like you don't just get rid of people to get rid of people, but you have to kind of begin to look at that from the lens of like a sports team. How do I make my sports team better? If you had the same roster year over year, you're likely in the bottom of the pack year over year, right? Because you're not looking at where can we replace, where can we get better? And I think that organizations, the more that they're vocal about that, and they have buy-in as a whole, the more powerful that you're going to be as an organization. And you're pushing people to get the best out of their job, right? We need to talk more about excellence. We need to talk more about being remarkable at what you do. We need to talk less about mediocrity or ignoring mediocrity or ignoring, just kind of the half-assed behavior or the half-assed output. We want excellence. And I think when you look at that, more organizations need to preach that and talk about that, because when you talk, it's like another little saying is, what you talk about. No, I'm sorry. What you think about, you begin to talk about. What you talk about, you begin to feel. What you feel begins to be, I guess, an outcome, or it kind of works down as a layered approach. And it's so true. And I think when you see organizations that get themselves in a bind, they typically have failed in some of these core principles and core categories. And a lot of times it's fear driven. It's, oh my, what is my boss going to say? It's all this. It's not a very, free and confident approach. It kind of gets locked in the art of fear. And that's really a bad place, I think, to be as an organization. But nonetheless, I think we'll continue to watch it and see how it grows.
No, that's a good analogy. And to kind of tie it into sports, I mean, you look at, every year there's the World Series, there's a Super Bowl, there's the Stanley Cup, and these sports organizations with the top talent are winning these things. But you have to understand that when they win the Super Bowl, they are the best of the best at that point in time for now. Now, when the new season starts, they're nothing. I mean, they're not. I mean, they're World Series or Super Bowl champions from last year, but they're not this year. They've got to reprove that all over again. It's not their world champion now forever. I won this sport. I won this individual competition. I'm the best of the best, and the best there ever will be, and I'll be around forever. Every year, it's a new thing. And same with your organization. You might be the best in brakes today. Tomorrow, you might be bankrupt. You might be nothing. You look at restaurants. So all these are very short-term goals. You achieve the pinnacle. Look, I become CEO. I'm suddenly CEO of whatever organization. And then next year, your earnings fall, your shareholders are gone, everything goes to shit. And suddenly you just went from the top to being disgraced in the media to absolute nothing. So I think to get complacent, and whatever your job role is, again, it can be from the very bottom to the very top. If you're not the best of the best, and like, you pointed out, Gideon, and there's cuts every year, oh, baby, you can guarantee that they're looking at you. But if you're the guy that's out there, that's pushing ideas and creating, a little bit of conflict and stuff in the organization, always pushing the limit, they're looking at you and thinking, well, this guy might be a pain in the ass, but Jesus, he's trying to get stuff done. He's not sitting back and collecting a paycheck and going home at the end of the day. He cares, about this organization.
Well, and you think of it from the lens of an owner, right? You took a risk, you did something, you've created something, and it grows. I want those guys in my organization, right? I want next level thinkers. I want guys that are going to challenge not only myself, but also the status quo. And I think we've kind of I think it's a generational thing over the last decade that we've kind of got away from that. And people are very much like, just show up and do a couple of things and move on. They don't give a shit, right? And we've got to get rid of that culture. That culture is a cancer. And that culture won't drive innovation. It won't drive, it won't drive kind of the next level thinking. It won't drive curiosity. It won't drive creativity. It just drives status quo. And I think from an automotive perspective, because we're so greatly passionate and deeply involved in automotive, we really got to adopt that level of thinking. And that level of thinking will drive output. It will drive future growth. It will drive, more dollars in your pocket, in your employees' pockets, in your staff pocket. Everyone's more happy, and you're now driving a formal kind of championship team, so to speak. And that's a very exciting place to be.
Correct. So, and I think that's good. And that's a great way to wrap things up, Gideon, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is so exciting to be back coming off Apex. I know we had a lot going on. That was an exciting week. I know we're not going to be attending PRI this year. That is going on here, I think, second week here in about 10 or 12 days out in Indianapolis. All of the performance industry comes together. And so, but yes, it's been a great week. So glad to get back. We look forward to so many great guests. If you're looking at having a voice in the industry, if you're looking at a platform that you want to talk about your vision, your ideas, challenge us, challenge the status quo, challenge the future of it. I know we talk a lot about tech. We talk a lot about technology and AI and where things are going. We love being aggressively challenged. And if you see it in a completely different light, please, I encourage you to come on. We have a lot of great offerings, even opportunities to get your publications through the Automotive Insiders magazine. But as always, please like and subscribe. If you don't like and subscribe, don't have to. Who cares? No one cares. But we will still be here. So as always, we are the voice of the industry. This is 2W Podcast.